Hello, I'm Luis Moscoso, your representative in the 1st Legislative District, and this is my legislative assistant, Michelle Meeker-Pinn. You might remember her from last year. This is our new offices here in the John L. O'Brien Building in Olympia, which has just reopened. It was closed for about 18 months due to some renovation from the Nisqually earthquake, and now we're finally moving back in. Let's take a look inside.
I'm always impressed by the art that our members bring into their offices, and I see you have monkey lamps and a monkey wooden thing here.
I happen to like primates,
Okay.
and monkeys in particular. You know, in a former life, I have a degree in anthropology, so
Okay.
I like to remember the animal kingdom and our relationship to it, and perhaps to remind ourselves that as humans, we need to be a little more elevated than some of our monkey cousins and learn to work together.
Talk to me a little bit about this portrait of Cesar Chavez.
He's been a hero, role model for me ever since I was very young, back in the 60s and in college. I actually had the pleasure of meeting him once. He was in Everett, Washington, and gave a speech. And I certainly would like to have him looking over my shoulder as I work, particularly in this time of recession.
Especially now. And over there you also have Martin Luther King.
When I was a teenager, back in the mid-60s, and a lot of the civil rights things were going on then, my mother used to talk a lot about Dr. King and about what we needed to do for civil rights in the country.
And this is back in Iowa.
Yeah, I was just going to say, this is from a Midwestern town, Dubuque, Iowa, that is about 95% white still at this time. And there were very few families of color in Iowa. So it was important for me, as I was paying attention to all this strife in the country around civil rights, around discrimination, that and living in a very pristine, idyllic city like Dubuque, I didn't see that happening. So it was always such a contradiction of what's going on in my country, and looking at the privileges I had growing up in a city like that took care of me, gave me a good education, and wondering, what am I going to do when I go out into the world?
With these two big men watching over you as you carry out your legislative work, I'm sure that there's no way you can possibly fail. And let's talk a little bit about the legislative session. It's a short one.
Some precision cuts were done in 2011 and were somewhat done in the special session to move money around, but we knew that the big issues are going to be still yet to be faced. I think everything should be on the table. I mean, I'm willing to look at everything that perhaps folks who think differently than me might want to look at, if they'll look at my concerns, and then what is the best way to come through all of this, preserving what we want to preserve, and understanding that whatever the programs and services are that we end up wanting to keep, that we find a way to pay for it too. Because it's not just about laying off people and cutting a budget just to balance it, because you can balance a budget, but it doesn't mean you're going to deliver services and programs that people want. Too often people realize after the fact, oh, I didn't know that was going to happen because you had to cut the budget. Right. And since everybody's going to feel some pain in this, how do you do that in a way that you inflict the least amount of pain on those least able to sustain or to survive from what you do to them?
I understand that you're working on a couple of important issues, and one of them is streamlining how government works.
I was offered an opportunity to prime this bill just at the very end of the special session, and I do have a background in organizational development and lean management from work I did at community transit back in the late 90s. When I came into the legislature, I was really hoping that I could go back at looking at what it would take to streamline what we do in the state and be more effective and more efficient. And everybody uses those words, but nobody seems to know the techniques to do that. And a lot of folks will talk about, well, the private sector can do it better. Government and the private sector are two different entities, and neither one can do what the other one does. There are techniques and procedures, though, that can work in both, perhaps finely tuned to work better one way or another, whether it's private or government. And there have been attempts here since the Locke administration with the quality initiatives that he did, as well as Governor Gregoire's GMAP and other things. But if those things had been done a little more thoroughly, I think a lot of the pain we're seeing now in right-sizing government would have been less. It still would have been difficult because the recession is so deep, but a lot of those things that we could have, should have done then can and still must be done now if we're going to streamline government to get it to the right size to do the things we need it to do.
I also understand that you were going to be working on solving the statewide gang problem.
Yes, this was a problem that I kind of backed into. I got onto the Public Safety Emergency Preparedness Committee and discovered this horrific problem with gangs around the state. And one of the things that I learned over the interim was that there was a lack of coordination, amongst different law enforcement. They do talk to each other, but the biggest problem they have is they don't have a sustainable budget to continue working on this problem, particularly in the areas of intervention and prevention. The federal government, FBI, and a lot of other law enforcement agencies have demonstrated, without a doubt, that funding for intervention and prevention is the best and the only way to really reduce gang violence.
We're going to be following the progress of that bill, and for now, that's all the time we have. Thank you for having us today, and we will be seeing you very soon.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for coming, and hope that as many people as possible can come down and visit me in Olympia, or at least give me a phone call. Thank you.